Welcome to the Political Bridge. I am Ada. Today we are tackling a major environmental clash. The Trump administration is moving forward with plans to strip federal protections from millions of acres of national forests, opening them up to commercial logging and resource extraction. Supporters argue this will boost rural economies, cut down on catastrophic wildfires by clearing out dead timber, and create much-needed jobs in timber towns. Critics warn it will destroy vital wildlife habitats, release massive amounts of stored carbon into the atmosphere, and sell off public lands to private corporate interests for short-term profit. Let us bring in our debaters. Nico, you support the administration's push. Jordan, you oppose it. Nico, kick us off with your opening argument. Why is opening national forests the right move for the country right now?
For decades, we have locked up our public lands under heavy federal rules, and the results are disastrous. When forests become overcrowded with dead trees and brush, they do not stay pristine. They turn into ticking time bombs for catastrophic wildfires that destroy entire towns and pump millions of tons of carbon into the air. By opening these national forests to active management and sustainable logging, we can clear out the danger zones and protect nearby communities. This policy is not about handing public land over to corporations for nothing. It is about restoring healthy forests while bringing good-paying blue-collar jobs back to rural towns that depend on the timber industry. When loggers are allowed to work, local economies thrive, schools get funded, and our forests become much safer from raging fires. Furthermore, this debate over public lands policy touches the daily lives of every working American who relies on affordable building materials for housing. We need practical solutions that balance human safety and resource needs instead of locking everything away.
That argument sounds neat on paper, but the reality on the ground is entirely different. Stripping federal protections from millions of acres of national forests does not protect anyone. It hands over our shared public heritage to large timber corporations for cheap commercial exploitation. When you clear-cut old-growth forests, you destroy fragile ecosystems that endangered wildlife relies on to survive. You also eliminate nature's own carbon sinks, which makes global warming much worse for every family trying to breathe clean air. Rural economies do not win in the long run either. Once the valuable timber is gone, corporations pull out and leave behind devastated landscapes and dead towns, just like we have seen happen over and over again in the past. We can protect communities from wildfires by clearing brush right around homes and neighborhoods, not by logging deep inside pristine wilderness areas. Public lands belong to all of us, not to logging executives looking for a quick payout at the expense of our future.
Thank you both. Let us dig deeper into the core tension here. Nico focuses on active forest management to stop wildfires and boost local jobs. Jordan focuses on protecting ecosystems and stopping corporate exploitation of public lands. How do we reconcile the urgent need to prevent catastrophic fires with the permanent loss of wild ecosystems? Nico, let us start with your cross-examination of Jordan.
Jordan claimed that active management is just an excuse for corporate exploitation and that we can protect towns by only clearing brush near homes. That claim ignores the basic science of how massive wildfires actually spread across vast federal acreage. You cannot stop a raging crown fire by just trimming bushes in someone's backyard. The fuel builds up deep inside the forest, and when it catches, it jumps over small, defenseless buffer zones and destroys everything in its path. Leaving millions of acres untouched is not preservation. It is neglect that invites total ecological ruin. Look at what happened in California and Oregon over the past decade. Millions of acres burned to ash, releasing more carbon in weeks than a century of sustainable logging ever would. We need real timber management, not empty slogans that ignore the physical reality on the ground. By allowing selective harvesting, we reduce the fuel load, fund local conservation work, and keep lumber prices stable for families trying to buy a home. Real environmentalism means managing our resources wisely, not locking the gates and walking away.
Nico just defended a logging policy by pointing to catastrophic wildfires, but his solution completely misses the mark. Commercial logging companies are not driving out into the deep backcountry to meticulously remove dead brush tree by tree. They want the biggest, oldest, most valuable trees, which are actually the most fire-resistant parts of the forest. Opening up these protected areas to heavy machinery tears up the soil, damages watersheds, and introduces invasive species that make future fires burn even hotter and faster. Pretending that heavy commercial logging is a conservation tool is simply dishonest. The administration's plan removes long-standing environmental safeguards precisely so logging companies can bypass public review and rush into sensitive habitats without oversight. If we genuinely care about stopping wildfires, we should fund direct, targeted ecological thinning projects run by trained scientists and local firefighters, not hand public lands over to private timber conglomerates. We must protect our natural heritage for the next generation, not cash it out today.
This is a sharp disagreement on the facts. Nico, your argument relies on the idea that commercial logging acts as necessary wildfire prevention, but Jordan points out that logging targets large, older trees rather than dangerous brush, making fires worse. Both claims cannot be true. Nico, how do you prove that commercial loggers target the exact fuel sources that cause crown fires? Jordan, your weak point is how you fund massive backcountry brush removal without using timber sales to offset the high costs. How do you pay for it? Let us start with Nico.
Ada, that challenge rests on a misunderstanding of how modern timber contracts are structured and executed on public lands. Federal agencies write strict rules specifying which trees loggers can cut, focusing directly on small-diameter ladder fuels that carry fire into the treetops. When timber companies buy these rights, the revenue generated goes right back into funding further forest health projects, including controlled burns and stream restoration. Without timber sales, taxpayers would have to foot a massive multi-billion-dollar bill just to clear out the overgrowth that decades of federal neglect allowed to pile up. Expecting Congress to approve endless blank checks for non-commercial brush removal is completely unrealistic in our current budget environment. Sustainable logging pays for itself while providing the raw materials needed for American housing. It is a practical loop where economic activity directly supports environmental stewardship, rather than relying on wishful thinking and unfunded government mandates. We must use market incentives to solve ecological problems, because government-only approaches consistently fail to get the job done.
That argument sounds convenient, but the timber industry's own financial incentives run entirely counter to clearing small, worthless brush. Companies make their profits from high-volume, large timber extraction, not from clearing low-value scrub wood that costs more to haul away than it is worth. When protections are stripped away, logging companies routinely target commercially valuable old-growth stands under the guise of wildfire mitigation. To answer Ada's question about funding, we do not need to rely on commercial logging to pay for safety. We can fund targeted ecological restoration directly through dedicated federal conservation grants and a small fee on high-end commercial land use, ensuring public funds go straight to trained crews. Public lands are a public trust, not a piggy bank for the timber industry to raid whenever budget shortfalls pop up. True conservation requires investing public resources into protecting nature, not selling off our natural defenses to the highest corporate bidder under false pretenses.
We have reached the core clash. Nico argues that commercial logging pays for vital wildfire defense and keeps timber markets stable. Jordan counters that logging targets profitable old-growth trees while failing to stop fires and demands direct public funding for safety. Neither side is giving an inch. Let us move to our closing arguments. Nico, you have the floor.
The choice before us is clear. We can continue down the path of federal neglect, where locked-away forests choke on overgrowth and eventually go up in devastating carbon-heavy smoke. Or we can embrace active management that uses sustainable timber harvests to reduce wildfire risks, support rural jobs, and provide affordable building materials for everyday families. Protecting our environment does not mean locking people out and watching nature burn down. It means working with the land, managing resources responsibly, and using market forces to fund conservation efforts that actually work. The administration's plan offers a sensible way forward out of a dangerous status quo that has failed our forests and our communities for decades. We owe it to future generations to manage our public lands with wisdom and practical strength, rather than sentimental slogans that leave our forests vulnerable to total destruction. Thank you for listening to this vital conversation today.
The administration's push to strip protections from our national forests is a giveaway to corporate special interests disguised as wildfire prevention. When we sell off public lands to commercial loggers, we sacrifice clean water, endangered wildlife, and ancient carbon sinks for short-term corporate profit. Real conservation means listening to climate scientists and ecologists who tell us that old-growth forests are our best defense against global warming, not targets for clear-cutting. We can protect our rural towns and homes from wildfires through smart, targeted community defense and dedicated public funding, without sacrificing our irreplaceable wilderness areas. Public lands belong to every single American, and we have a duty to defend them against exploitation. We must reject policies that trade our natural heritage for quick cash and instead build a sustainable future where our forests remain wild and protected for all to enjoy. Thank you for tuning in to this important debate.
That wraps up our debate today. Find The Political Bridge on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Join us next time for another engaging discussion. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep the debate alive.